Hi, Dan Halsey here, and we are going to get started with the types of designs that we work on and also the types of landscapes that we work on, showing some examples of our work. Again, United Designers is our host organization for the training and also the co-op for the designers, working together for a better world and also better design standards. So we work in a lot of different size spaces. Community spaces, community gardens, small gardens, homesteads of all sizes, quarter acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, 15 acres, and also on farms. So there's a lot of different types of work we do in different areas of the country and the world. As you can see here, we have a fairly standard format of the work that we do and how we show it in our design. This changes, of course, with the landscape and what we're working with. Also, the size of the area might be different. A half acre, quarter acre, 68,000 acres, whatever it might be assured that this work can be done in Adobe Illustrator because we have a very large canvas to work with. And it's a great size for doing our work, and especially in the artwork file. We can pretty much do any size needed for that at a common scale. Then it's put on the title block. Keep in mind that Adobe Illustrator is used for a lot of artwork, a lot of different things we do, and everything you see in this presentation other than a photograph was done with Adobe Illustrator, even the logos and all the artwork. Hopefully you'll get a chance to work on a large-scale design project, large-scale restoration, watershed restoration, something like that. All the things we're doing, again, just like working in different locations, apply at different scales. It's just that sometimes in the mapping we need to be a little more general with the strategies and then hold on to those site-specific details in other documentation. We're looking for practices. We're looking for repeating patterns on the landscape, things like that. The detail and site details usually to a smaller scale project are transformed to general practices on larger sites. So we're looking for watershed management or restoration processes, things like that, and we're identifying larger areas for that. Decisions are made on each area of interest based on the agreed strategies for recurring conditions. So we have basically a library or a catalog of different things that we're trying to do. Maybe we've also made a stream bed registry or a field registry so we can kind of keep track of where we're working and what might be needed in different areas. So the practices are based on repeated and varied conditions needing restoration or adjustments. Maps are broken down from larger landforms like watersheds to smaller patterns such as individual stream beds. Aerial imaging in GIS can visually help define the plant communities and landform slope, elevation, and soil condition that are to be represented in the design. It is our hope that we will work together with a lot of different people on these projects, especially on the left here. We have 58,000 acres in Molokai on this site assessment. And on the right was a project in Haiti that was 6,000 acres. So the terrain is different, the latitude is different, everything is different about these sites, but our process and our design strategies are very similarly the same. We just have to take into account the different cultural practices, climate differences, and then also the soil and geology. So one of the things we do much of the time is we're working on a property and we'll zoom into an area because the entire property is not being done. I do like to map the entire property and do a base map for that and then zoom into the area that we're going to work on. That gives the client the big map, the big base map for their entire property for future use, and of course maybe hiring us again. And then we just zoom into where we're going to be working. In this case, a food forest on a residential property. These areas and all the patches and the little forest areas that are done here are also zoomed in on artboards so they can see and more easily plant and install the different plants, depending upon whether it's the client or ourselves doing that. You'll also notice the polycultures are on the right side to help identify what the plants are and the numbers of plants being used in those features. One of the things that came out of this design of the group of people that were working on it is that we started to extract the different pieces and parts and types and sizes of food forests that we might put together, and we built these packages. These were actually used on websites locally by the different installers, the different designers, because we can anticipate the cost of and the labor involved in putting in each one of these different sizes of food forests. Plus, there are examples, along with photographs, that we can show on a website and have packages to help people get started. Maybe they just want to try it. Maybe they just want to kind of test the water. Well, here's a different way of showing that to people right on the website with a predictable cost of what it would take to buy the plants and install it. This also comes into the United Designers Library and your own library, so you can pull this for other projects and then change out the plants as needed. Here's a small residential lot base map. You'll see this in the course. This is an assignment that needs to be done from an aerial picture. The aerial has been removed in this case. But this is a simple urban base map, suburban even. You can see the power lines, the fence line, the property lines, sidewalks, the roads, the deck, all those kinds of things. This is the simplest of base maps, but it also gives us enough information to help do the design work and get started. Once the design is done, we've actually used the same files, different layers, and output, in this case, an Acrobat PDF. The red lines you see for measurements here to help with installation were actually done in Acrobat, which is a pretty good way of measuring where things are in our designs and help to get things in the soil, especially if we're working with designers who are not familiar with the design in itself. Be sure to know that when we place this artwork, which was done at 1:20 scale, it's in a new scale in the title block. In this case, it's 1 inch equals 5 feet. That noted, with Acrobat, it can do measurements and help us to get things placed. Larger farm sizes, not a problem with Adobe Illustrator. Everything to scale, still 20 scale as we're working on this, and then rescaled on the title block. In this case, 1 inch is 62 feet, or 1 centimeter is 750 centimeters. Notice all the callouts on the side and the use of space. Although we don't want to fill up everything, and it's good to have negative space and white space to rest our eyes, with the muted colors and the details that we're using, it's actually not too bad to look at for quite a length of time. If they were saturated colors and heavy colors, it adds a lot of fatigue to our eyes. In our client's case, they don't even know it, but they're tiring from looking at the map. In our case, we're using all the space here to show in detail things that are rather small when we show the whole field. Also, note that everything in our designs is backed by science. And we have an 8-page data table, which you've heard about, that we fill out for our designs. That information is relayed into the base map, and other things that aren't used in the base map, of course, are used in making decisions. Along with this, keep in mind that the Society for Ecological Restoration has a lot of great resources on their website and in books about natural capital and restoring landscapes. This information, these questions, also are part of the data table at the end as an appendix. In some areas, we'll get information in so many different ways, but we take that information into Adobe Illustrator, bring it in, and create our new maps from this. In this case, a high-resolution aerial image was done with a drone in Haiti, and that information then is relayed into our maps. In this case, we have a very high-resolution image that we can use for making our base map, and then turn off the artifacts which are created from the software of GIS. That's turned into our design. That's turned into, this case, the functional spaces, which is done after the base map. We use orange lines to highlight areas of function and spaces and their use in order to get started in the design process. This is the first thing that we want to show our client of what our intention is and how we want to use the land, so they can agree with us as we're moving forward or make corrections based on what their preferences might be. Also, what we can do is use the aerial picture that we're supplied with, either off Google Earth or from the client or from our own drone, however that might be, and enhance that, in this case, coloring the different areas based upon the cultural practices or the condition of the land. This is helpful, again, to explain to our clients what kind of work we want to get done and help to get to their solutions. Visiting the land, always a priority. As soon as possible and as soon as you get there, you're going to understand more and more how it's being used and help with the design solutions. The final design here, again, a very large space with lots of callouts that you can see on the sides to show what's being planted in the different areas, and a very creative way of showing the different important spaces that are zoomed in and basically close-ups and callouts on the edges of the design. On the lower left, you'll see more graphics explaining about how things would be planted, more explanations about the berms and swales. All these things can be done in Adobe Illustrator on your design work. Also keep in mind that these areas can be printed out in artboards and separated out later into a multi-page PDF. Close-ups of any time can be used to zoom into an area to work and then highlight that area and export that printed out for the client so you have everything in one document. Another large-scale farm, just like we're working on here. Lots going on there, but keep in mind that there always is supporting documentation. A farm design report that's given to the client. The data table in the far right column in the data table is for our recommendations, basically kind of the so what column, where we have the information in the other columns of what's important for the client, but we also need to explain why it's important and why that affects the design. Here too in Adobe Illustrator, we can make changes in the design depending upon who our clients are or who is going to be seeing it. On the right is the irrigation plan with all the details of the plants and the trees in the final design. On the left is a simpler file, just basically coloring the areas, taking out the irrigation and fading everything back behind these colored patches for a simple explanation of land use. That was for the board of directors for this organization, and it just gives them the information that they're interested in without the complexity of all the design features. Ecosystem Restoration Camp here. This is just a simple aerial picture with notations put on it and a scale bar for using in Zoom or WebEx. Sometimes we're not making a design so much as we're trying to create a graphic to explain and have discussions with the clients about what we're going to do in moving forward. Again, walking the land, boots on the ground. Here we see somebody with a GIS sensor for GPS and basically marking the land so we can make sure that we're accurate with our design work. We can do the designs as much as we want, but we need to be accurate and we need to have boots on the ground to make sure that our solutions are justified and accurate. As we progress through the design system and our process, we develop the components to move forward with our designs. We have our base map, and then after much study and solutions and drawing, we have our concept map. Along with that, as a component in our concept map are the polycultures. Some of these polycultures might be general and overall not really filled in, but mostly for function and types of plants. But eventually we will have, as shown here, very complex polycultures with the adjoining Excel or spreadsheet plant lists for each of those polycultures. These are highly localized for the project that we're doing, historically accurate for things that have been active on that property or that site in the past. And in the design process, we have highly simplified the pattern of tree planting to make it available and easy to understand how things will be applied, as in this title block, but then have adjoining documentation to show in more detail what the plants will be and how they will be positioned. Much of the larger features on the property are apparent and easily understood, but of course may require some additional documentation and drawings to show how the functional spaces are within, say, a high tunnel or the greenhouse or other spaces on there. But these three main components being our map, our supporting documentation and artwork, and the spreadsheet for the plant lists are the three main components we use for moving forward in our design process. Thank you for attending another session. On this topic, please keep in mind if you have any questions, you can bring them to our Thursday discussions. If you're in that subscription type, you can also contact me and the rest of the students on WhatsApp and have immediate answers to a lot of the questions you might have. And keep in mind, you can pause, replay at any time any of the presentations in order to get better detail. And your questions help us refine the course for everybody. And it does make for great discussion during our Thursday chats. So we'll see you on Zoom, hopefully on WhatsApp. Thanks again.